Thank you, Tina.
Well, thank you, everybody, both here. I'm happy to see, partial faces, and all of you online. Thank you for logging in and being here. So I'm going to talk about the types of records and the way that you can research at Great Lakes Regional Archives, which is part of the NARA system. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what NARA is and how we can use it for our genealogy. Then I'm going to dive into the types of things that you can get out of the archives here in Chicago. Thanks, man. Uh-oh, now I can't advance because I've shared my screen. Speak. Technology. There we go. Okay. Sorry.
Is it too dark?
Is pointless on this one. Okay. So the National Archives has a series of archives spread all across the country. So you have regional hubs, which are places like Atlanta, Kansas City, Chicago, San Francisco. And then you have like our main archive units, which are National Archives 1 in Washington, D.C. We have National Archives 2, which is in College Park, Maryland. And then we have what's called the NPRC, which is the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Each of the regional hubs, each of the regional archives is responsible for collecting federal records related to the 6 or 7 surrounding states. So for example, here in Chicago at Great Lakes Archives, we have records for Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. So what necessarily does that mean? It means if we're looking for naturalization records, we're looking on the archive site for those states. If we're looking for FBI records or criminal records or trademark infringements, we're looking within those 7 states if you're utilizing the Great Lakes Archives. So how do you find out what the locations are? If you go to archives.gov in the upper right-hand corner, if you click on our location, it's going to break down all of the regional archives, all of the specialty archives. So you're going to see 37 different listings from Seattle to Florida. And it's going to give you contact information, the exact address, and it's going to give you the website to take you directly to that page. One thing I want you to be aware of, National Archives facilities are still closed. While most of them still have staff in the building, they're working at reduced capacities. So you don't have access to be able to walk in the door, but there are people there. So if you were to email them and ask a question, if you needed clarification on something, if a link was broken on a web page, you could contact them and they would get back to you. I have a couple of friends who have actually gotten answers to requests throughout this time. So they are doing research depending on the archives branch. NPRC is not doing any research for anybody. They're too far behind. But Chicago's doing research, Atlanta is filling railroad records requests. So there are people who are still working in the buildings. If you go to the link, the coronavirus link for the updates, it was last updated in July, and it talks about opening August 2nd. We know that was all blown apart with the variant. So that's the last update we have. We do not have a date as to when all of the facilities are going to open just yet, but they have been busy. They've been digitizing things and making them available through their websites. They've been moving and restoring and rehousing records collections. So for example, they've moved a huge collection of criminal court records that deal with Illinois and Northern Indiana. So what is considered to be the 6th Court of Appeals, that's the former Amy Coney Barrett district for Northern Indiana and Illinois, those records have been moved to Kansas City. So they are still working and they are still handling and processing records. So now for us, this is completely, moot at the moment because obviously their hours of operation, there's nobody there. You can't make an appointment to come in just yet, but like I said, they do have their contact information on their page, so you could send them an email if you had a question about a records group, if you had a question about whether or not a particular collection or document exists, you would be able to reach out to them. While they're not as active on their Facebook pages as they normally would be, they are still posting things to their Facebook pages. So you can go out and see what's going on in each of the different facilities. You can follow them and get updates and learn about what's going on. Potentially when they're planning on reopening or things like that. All of that's going to be posted live on their Facebook pages. And the National Archives does a fantastic job of just being on social media in general, and I'll kind of talk about that at the very end. Anytime you go to an archives facility, you have to have a valid ID with you. So you can even take a passport if you're not a US citizen, but you need to have a valid ID with you. What they're going to do is they're going to create a research card for you that's good for a couple of years. They're going to make you watch a short PowerPoint video about how to use the archives. Don't use pen, don't tear things out, don't steal things. And then they're going to assign you to a place. So they'll give you access to the lockers. You'll put all of your stuff away. They even maybe take my scarf off. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to hide in a knit, a crocheted scarf, but phone, computer, laptop, if you've got it with you, scanner, are all they're going to let you bring. They really even discourage paper and pencil because they don't want you to slide papers in and try to walk out with them. So they really aren't a big fan of you bringing paper with you either. They will stamp the back of any paper that you bring with so that as you're checking out, the person knows that those are what you came into the center using. You can absolutely bring your own devices. I usually go with a couple of different cameras. I have my phone. You can bring a flatbed scanner. You could bring one of those tabletop cameras where it photographs books. They just won't let you use the wand scanners because they don't want you to damage any documents as you're trying to scan. If you'd rather just make copies while you're there, you absolutely can. It's 75 cents per copy. If you're dealing with textual documents that have staples, they'll usually have you bring it to the counter, they'll take out the staples, and then you can take your copies. They have an enormous microfilm collection. So if you've ever been to the National Archives facility on Pulaski, when you walk in where the computers are in the middle and all the microfilm readers are, that whole wall is nothing but microfilm cabinets. And if you pull those skinny little 4-inch cabinets out, there's probably 100 reels per cabinet. There are hundreds of them. Typical stuff, US Census, Civil War records, Revolutionary War records that have been microfilmed and are available to you. But the true gold in the microfilm collection is their city directories. These are way better than you're getting on Fold3. These are way better than what you're finding in Ancestry. These are those small, tiny communities that don't get picked up by conglomerates like Ancestry. So you go to Fold3, for example, and they've got Chicago. That's all they've got for Illinois. They don't have Springfield. They don't have Rockford. They don't have Elgin, right? Or in Wisconsin, they've got Milwaukee, but they don't have Madison. They don't have Appleton. Regional archives as well as in Washington, D.C. So it is a mind-boggling number. But what we have here for the entire U.S., it's not just those 7 states that I was talking about. They really have them for all over here. Just available for you to view once we're allowed to walk in the door. They also have, at the time, they had 3. I don't know if they're going to expand that when COVID is over and they reopen or not. But they have 3 computers available for you to do a little additional online searching. So yes, they have Ancestry, they have ProQuest, but a couple of things that you might not be familiar with or that you might not have played around with are Jstor and Archives USA. So they have subscriptions to both of these databases. Jstor is historic journals, peer-reviewed, historical society type publications and things like that. Everything. We're not just talking genealogy. If you want to read the New England Journal of Medicine from 1906, you could do that in Jstor. So it's a huge collection of peer-reviewed journals and magazines. And then Archives USA is just how it sounds. It gives you access to manuscripts collections, not digitized, but at least lets you know that something exists. where you can look at articles and different things about things that they have within the collections within the United States. So they're not available everywhere. They're typically things you only see at like larger universities, sometimes community colleges. But it's worth it just to go in and play with these two alone, even if you're not using Ancestry or ProQuest, which we have access to already through our libraries. So now what if I want to do textual research? What if I want to sit at a table and have them bring documents out of the archives for me to handle? There's a process that is involved. So when you get there, once you put everything in your locker, they'll assign you to a particular table where you're going to sit, and then they're going to give you triplicate forms that you're going to fill out in order to request the documents that you're looking for. When you walk in that room, the whole left side of the room is filled with shelves that are just full of binders. They're just full of finding aids covering every kind of conceivable record group that they have at the National Archives there on Pulaski. And what a record group is think of it like here at the library. If I want to go to the shelf, I'm going to go to nonfiction and I'm looking for cookbooks. Cookbooks would be the record group. A record series would be baking, it'd be barbecuing, it'd be ethnic foods, would be the series. But the record group would be what the topic is as a whole. So for example, record group 15 is Native American records. And that includes everything from Native American censuses to inventories and financial records and all kinds of things in groups underneath that. Record group 21 is circuit court records. So that's things like land condemnations, naturalizations. I'm going to show you more examples of that in just a second. But the record group is the overarching category. Does that kind of make sense? And then series within it. So military records would be a record group. And then First World War, Second World War, Vietnam would be record series within it. So original records are available to view. Almost every collection that's within the National Archives walls is accessible and viewable. There are occasionally collections that are closed because they have date restrictions. And in the record, when you go to request it, it'll tell you right away, this record group is closed. So you'll know before wasting the time to research a collection whether or not you have access to it or not. So some cool things that are in there, like the Great Lakes maritime records, are going to have things on like the Christmas ships, you know, where they brought the trees across the Great Lakes for sales, or the Eastland disaster. I'm going to talk about that at the very end. So each category falls into a particular record. So as you're doing your research, you're going to see those numbers listed quite a bit. So these finding aids, and I apologize, those of you at home can't really see my movements, but all of those binders in the background are the different record groups that exist in the finding aids within it. And the one on the left, this is what the finding aid looks like. So I pulled out just one of the binders for the record group for Native American records for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And it kind of gives me a loose breakdown or an outline. So if you remember back in school days when you had to write your reports and build your outlines, the general categories of the types of records that exist. So do I want to look at legal and legislative records? Do I want to look at administrative records? Do I want to look at just general records? And then from there, there's another binder that spells out how many records do they have in each of these collections. How many boxes, how many folders, how many pages. So it might say the Register of Oneida Families 1902 to 1918 is 17 boxes. And here's how they break down by year. 1902 is one box, 1903 is another box, 1904 is another box. Or it might tell me that they break down alphabetical by surname. So it could be chronological, it could be alphabetical, it could be by location. So it could be that these are done by reservations, or these are done by cities or towns alphabetically. So the finding aids on the wall kind of break down how you can get into the collection, what they have, and how can you ask for it. So I had gone in and looked at these records. I had pulled the second binder off the shelf that told me what they were, 6 boxes, 17 boxes, figured out which box or which folder I needed. And then on the slip that they give me, I wrote down the information that came out of the finding. The name of the collection, so I'm looking at Register of Oneida Families 1902 to 1908, And then in the second book, which folder or which box I needed, that I needed box 6, and that it included surnames A to M or years 1902 to 1906. And I would write that right onto the record. I'm going to show you another one in just a second. So here's what one of those looks like. I don't know when I submit my record what the row, compartment, and shelf is. I just tell them what I'm looking for, and then somebody looks it up in their computer and writes down where it is. So it's like coming to the library and talking to Pam and I and saying, I'm looking for the new James Patterson book. And I tell you, oh, that's in fiction under PAT. That's what this is. That's them telling the person in the back how to find the record that I just asked for. And my card's expired, so don't try to copy my number. I won't do it again. Thanks to COVID, my card expired in March. So I wrote down what I wanted. I told them that I wanted the registers of death, that it was item number 245. So I looked in the inventory, and these are physical books. So there's 245 books. I need book 245. They went and grabbed book 245 and set it on the table in front of me. And I'm looking at the original books that were kept by the Bureau of Indian Affairs for the Oneida tribe in Wisconsin and in Michigan for the years roughly 1908 to 1918. And you can see on the screen that it gives me 2 sets of numbers, which is fascinating. It gives me the record that the birth was recorded. So it was the 364th birth, 389th birth, but it tells me the family number. So all of these books about births and deaths correspond back to the family books in the census books. So this family, Agnes Wheelock, her family, if there was a number, I could find out more about that family. So Esther Hill, her family is 729. So I'm going to look in the census records under family 729, find out who's in that household. So by using the finding aid to pull the records and look at the original records leads me down a path to find so much more. And the searches are truly endless. I mean, the National Archives has billions of pieces of paper. They have billions of individual microfilm images, per reel. So it's truly astounding the types of things that are in here. But besides just talking about Bureau of Indian Affairs, things like, this is record group 21, I believe, and it's criminal type records. It's federal court cases. So think about things that could be federal court. That includes naturalizations, which I'll talk about in a second. That includes federal lands. So this is about the arsenal. So this is about the land condemnation hearings when the arsenal expanded during the Second World War and took over all of those farms and farmsteads that were absorbed in cemeteries that were absorbed into the arsenal property. So the court hearings lists all the farmers and all the families that are impacted by this federal land condemnation, and the people who fought and hired their own lawyers to fight against the federal government taking their land or taking it for an unfair price. But it shows me also on this particular image all of the people who are impacted, all of the houses that were condemned, all of the people who lost parcels of land are listed on this one map. So we have a tendency to think that our family aren't going to show up in federal records. They didn't do anything to show up in a federal court case. Something like this, where they're coming in and they're condemning your land to expand an arsenal, expand a military base, expand an airport, would it be impacted? So when O'Hare was expanded, all of those people would show up in federal court records. Also, things like naturalizations, that's a federal process. So don't think that you have to have been, wanted by the FBI to show up in federal court records. There's a lot of reasons. But one federal court record that you would show up in would be, things like voter fraud, electioneering, intimidation. So I have an ancestor I was researching in Joliet who was trying to influence his vote for, the Joliet trustees, and he spent 6 months in jail for intimidating voters. So federal crime because it was voter tampering. So sometimes they do things that will show up in records like that. Like I said, within this overarching record group of federal court documents are the naturalization records. So the And the bad thing for us about this is that these are being digitized by Family Search and by Ancestry. So you will start to see these pop up if you've been in there within the last 18 months. A lot of these have already been input into those collections. So if there's already a digitized copy, they won't pull out the original for you any longer. So the downside is, if it's already online, they won't let you look at the original, but if it's not online, you can still look at the original. Does that make sense? So lucky for me, they didn't have my grandfather's online just yet, so I got to hold it in my hand and take a look at it. But if it's already scanned, they're just going to point you to the website, and they're no longer going to make that record accessible. But there are other things that are naturalization adjacent type records that you might want to take a look at. So things like the depositions that were done. So people who were applying for citizenship would have to sit and do a deposition, or if they questioned whether or not they thought they were a good candidate for citizenship, or maybe think about in the modern era, you have to do an interview before, after you take your test, you have to do an interview before you become a citizen. That's what these are. And these still exist that you can research and look through at each of the National Archives, depending on what region of the country it's in. They also have the people who petitioned, like if they were rejected and they wanted to reapply and they were petitioning for it to be accepted, those records are there. As well as the cancellation books. So think about when you write a check, right? Business would be a better example. And on the one side, you've got the check number and the stub, and then you rip the check off and pay somebody or take it to the bank or whatever. They have those stub books. So if your certificate is 9418, there is a corresponding stub that corresponds to 9418. And sometimes there's a lot of information that's written in that space, the date, the name of the person, the court in which they're naturalized, sometimes a little bit of additional information like their street address or a contact, way to contact them. Sometimes it's their spouse. So when you can't find a naturalization, something happened or something goes wrong, but you got a number, you can correspond that to the stub books. Does that make sense how the stub books work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Those are kind of fun. Now, you know that with naturalization records, pre-1906 is done by the states or the counties. After 1906, these records are available through the National Archives system because they're federalized. After 1920 is when they start including personal photographs as well. So like when I go and get a passport, I have to take a photo. You're going to find that in these applications after 1920. So you always want to make sure you flip it over and look at the back, because that's typically where the photo is. Or if it's already been scanned and you're looking at it online, make sure you look at the page before and the page after, just in case, because that's where the photo and the personal information is going to be. But besides just those federalized records, there are a handful. I won't say that it's a large collection, but it is a very hit or miss collection of state and local records pre-1906. So these are online, these are in Ancestry. You can see these through the National Archives system already by taking a look, but they give a really nice link that kind of explains why they don't have much before 1906 and where you can go and where you can look. And then what we do have, and here's why we have it. So some unusual things like Supreme Court records for the state of Illinois or the Supreme Court for Michigan. Sometimes they'll show up in there because you could naturalize before 1906 at any court. So I had an ancestor who naturalized in 1871 at the Supreme Court in Missouri. I had absolutely no idea why. But he did, and it was just another court like anything else, so his records exist there. So sometimes you'll find some of those things. Don't think it had to be the county. Don't think it had to be federal. There were lots of layers of the court system where these could show up, and they kind of explain that process to you through that link that's on their website. Alien registration files are separate. They are not part of this record group. They are a separate record group number 118. So if you want to know more about how alien registration files, how C files work, if you go to the link on immigrant aliens, it's going to provide more detail for you. It's not just during the war, although there are a lot of them during the war, First and Second World War. So For example, my Italian ancestors who had not naturalized and were still Italian citizens were kind of looked upon with suspicion during the Second World War. So not only did the FBI kind of keep an eye out on these alien immigrants, but they were also required to get an alien identification card. So kind of like our driver's licenses or our modern day records, they were required to have that. If somebody stopped and asked for it, they had to provide it. So you can contact the National Archives for access to those alien registration files, record group 118, and there's a really nice explanation. And you can order those online through the National Archives site. I'll show you that a little later on. So here's an example. Here's my great grandfather. So Jenny is my grandma, which is funny because she's listed twice. She's listed as Giovanina and Jenny. That's actually, I don't know where this one comes from. I think it's my Aunt Annie, and they just really messed it up. But it shows my grandfather when he arrived, the ship that he was on, the date that he came here. His wife's name is Christine. That yes, she was in Dunning at the time that he naturalized. She never naturalized. That they had 6 children, and they're all listed here on this naturalization form. That he arrived in 1904, and then on the second page, that's his declaration of intent. So again, it provides the same kind of information. One comes before the other. So you're declaring your intention. I want to become a U.S. citizen. That happens first. And then it takes about 2 years before the process is completed and you're accepted as a U.S. citizen. So what's interesting about these records is that at the time he started the process in 1924, his wife Christina was still living with him. By the time he completes the process, she's already been moved to Dunning. So that was a cool find between those 2 records to confirm the date that she went into the hospital. I have it also because I have the Cook County intake book that has him admitting her. So some cool stuff that you can find on that. What happens if archives is closed? I can't get to the facility. I want to get a copy of this record. You can easily start the process and apply for the records online. Even being in the building, there were some Bureau of Indian Affairs records that I could not view because they were just too delicate and it would be dangerous for me to handle them. So what I did was I put in my request online and they digitized them and sent me the link. So even though they were in the building, I couldn't access them. But now that none of us can be in the building, you can do that process online. So you can request alien files, you can request immigration, land records, census records, military records, right online through the National Archives website. Seems convoluted, there are a lot of steps to it, but it's really not so horrible. So when you click on that link, it takes you to the page that explains what's available online and what can you get copies of. You can create your cart and start to request the records of the copies of the records that you want. You're just following the prompts on the screen, filling out the forms with your personal information. They're going to ask for your research card number. You're going to put that in the box. Do I just want a copy? If I'm an institution, I can order an entire copy of a microfilm and pay for it. Do I want just a copy of a document? I can do that as well. So I can buy copies of microfilm records. You guys can't. Pam and I can. We can buy copies for our library. But for the rest of you, you're just going to be choosing that you want reproductions of documents. And you're going to choose what type of documents you want. Do you want land records? Do you want immigration records? Do you want census records? We don't really need access to census records at this point anymore, but the others are just as important. Those court records, like I was talking about, naturalizations, declarations of intent, but also those federal records as well. How do you want it? Do you want them to mail you a paper copy of it that they make photocopies of? Always get the scans because you can play with the scans. You can make something lighter, you can make something darker. When they send you a photocopy, you have no control over the quality of that. And let me tell you, the quality is not great because they're just scanning them. They're not adjusting them in any way, and they're just putting them in the mail. So either get a CD or take the electronic transfer, have them scan the originals then, and send you the copies. When you do that, like I said, they're going to ask for your research number. They're going to ask for the type of record you're looking for. This one's naturalizations. So what do you know? Do you know the number of the certificate? You can put that on the form. It's on the far right. If not, tell us everything. What's their first name? What's their last name? What's the rough date? What's the place where they're naturalizing? Can you tell us where they're from? Can you give us a rough date of when they arrived? We think our names are unique. They are absolutely not unique. So my grandpa, Casey, his name is Casimir Tatara. There's actually 2 Casimir Tataras in Chicago. So we think our names are unique. They're not. That's why they ask for all of this information, so that they're making sure that you're getting your money's worth by getting you a document that's the document you need. If you know the petition number or the certificate number, it's a moot point. They're going to go pull that document specifically. The archives uses I hate to say Dropbox, but it's like a Dropbox system called OneHub, where they'll take all of the materials that you've requested. Once they've digitized them, they put them into a folder dedicated for you with your request number, and then you have 30 days to go in and download the materials. After 30 days, the link is no longer valid. They delete the scans, but if you go in right away and download the images, then those images are yours to use in your research. Just like any other National Archives record, yes, these are public records and they're available to the public, but you still need to cite your source. You still need to say where you got it. You still need to say the record group, the record series, and all of the citation information on it, and that it came to you digitally from the National Archives. So you're still going to cite your sources, but you can use this information other than for profit publication any way that you'd like. Well, how do I even know what I'm looking for? How do I even know how to start the search, to ask the question, to get to the archives to look at the document? The National Archives has actually revamped their website and their search strategy over the course of the last year to try to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit more effective to get to the information that you're looking for. But like I said, there are billions of pages of documents that are within the National Archives system between those 37 locations. So when you're in the catalog system, it is very easy to find yourself down a rabbit hole and get completely lost because you click and you click and you click. It's like Cindy's list. And I don't know how I got to where I am by that point. They do have specialty pages for military documents, for genealogy and family history information. They do have a special page for educators if you wanted to use original primary sources for teaching. They do have dedicated pages for that. And I give you the link for how to get to the genealogy websites and forms on their page. You already have that in your handout. Take advantage of their forms because they're giving you the original copies of the forms for free. So instead of squinting your eyes and trying to read what it says in the headers for the 1850 census, just go and download it and have a copy of it and save yourself the trouble. Same thing with military and naturalization forms. You can download blanks so you can get an idea of what the form says. And then the applications to apply for these records, if you want to do it by mail, is available on the website as well. So if you're looking for modern records, you're doing that right online through the eVetRecs system. If I'm looking for historic records pre-1914, I still have to do it the snail mail way by filling out the form and mailing in the application. So you're still going to use their forms, whether you were in a digital age or not. So you can research the records, which is going to get you into their overarching catalog. Like I said, they've got dedicated pages, so I can learn more about veterans records. I can learn more about teachers' resources. They've got genealogies down here at the bottom under information for, so if I want to learn more. They have some absolutely fantastic publications that they put out. The Federal Register is one, Prologue Magazine. Prologue Magazine, if you haven't read it from the National Archives, does some really good in-depth articles about items within their collections. There's one in Prologue Magazine about how your ancestors were not Indian princesses. I mean, so they take it to heart, these rumors and these stories about genealogy, and they set the record straight. So Prologue will do something about the 1950 census, I can guarantee it. You know, they did things when First World War collections came out a couple of years ago. They're really very proactive in alerting you to new collections, to new accessible collections, to new digital collections that they've made available. Prologue is well worth the read, just like the Library of Congress monthly magazine. It's well worth the read. There's two types of collections I want you to be aware of so that you're getting the most out of your research. So if you search the catalog, it's going to be just like if you were here in the library and you're looking for the new James Patterson. You're going to put in your subjects or your record groups, and it's going to do a search for you. There are some born digital collections that they have that correspond to original records, but they don't show you original records. Does that make sense? It's like building an Excel spreadsheet of, you know, households in New Lenox in 1950, but you're not looking at the households. Does that kind of make sense? And those are the AAD. So what the AAD is, it breaks things down. They're largely military records, but there are some Department of State records and some other things in this collection where if I want to know whether somebody's a Second World War veteran or a Korean War veteran, I can go into the AAD and look at the databases that they've built. So I could go into the AAD, I could put in Alexander Kesich and see him listed as having enlisted in the Army during the Second World War. And it gives me bare bones information. His age, roughly the county in which he had served, what his occupation was before he had joined. He was a tool and die guy, like an AutoCAD kind of guy. And then, you know, what was his occupation in the military? He was a military police, so it says MP. So I can verify that he served, but it doesn't show me his record. But at least it's a good search so I can dig deeper into the catalog, if that makes sense. So it breaks it down by decade, it breaks it down by different types of records, but the AAD is something you keep in mind if you're doing 20th century type research. But we're going to talk about the catalog. I can search the catalog. I highly recommend looking at the link that says about the National Archives catalog, because if you are not familiar with record groups and how archival records are stored and housed, you need this information to understand what you're looking at. Because when you go to the page, I'm going to show you a page, it's going to give you all kinds of codes and abbreviations and acronyms. You need to know what those are, so you know what you're looking for. So take the 5 minutes, take a look at the About the National Archives catalog so that you're getting an effective search done before you get frustrated and go, if that makes sense. Just like anything else, enter your keyword search. So those of you who know me know I am absolutely obsessed with baseball. So I could put in Christy Mathewson, my favorite baseball player, and it's going to bring up records about Christy Mathewson. Or I could put in record group 21, Chicago, and it's going to show me the records within record group 21 that have Chicago somewhere in the description. Or I can say something like Schenectady, New York, and it's going to look for anything that references Schenectady, New York, from Revolutionary War records to, you know, modern copyright infringement records. So it's a huge search. Use an advanced search. Break it down by location, break it down by time period, break it down by, you know, subjects, to make it just a little easier so that you're really drilling down into the information that you want. Instead of just like Google, here's 8 million results, we're gonna let you figure it out. So I went to advanced search, and you can see my options. Work all that well there, but across the top of the page, I can limit my search even further. I can say I just want access to things that are already digitized online. Done. I can check mark that box. I just want things that have archival descriptions, meaning it's telling me how many boxes, how many folders, you know, what am I looking at? I can limit it that way. I can narrow by record group, so I did. I put in record group 120 at the top. My search is just the Army. That is a huge subject. But I'm going to use the filters to drill down further. So Army records, part of record group 120, which is the AEF, the American Expeditionary Forces, those who went overseas in the First World War, whether it was to France or whether it was the Canal Zone. I just want maps, because you'll have categories. Do you want artifacts? Do you want photographs? Do you want maps? Do you want video? Do you want documents? Choose what you want. I want maps specifically. Do I know what format I want? You could choose that, whether it's a JPEG, whether it's a PDF, whether it's a TIFF file, a movie file, I could choose. Where do I want to see them? And it brings up the list of all of the locations, all 37 locations. So I want to see Army records from Record Group 120 that are maps and charts that are at the National Archives 2 in College Park. So you see how we're zoning in on very specific types of documents that are already available online. Not just that they exist and they're there, but that are online for me to view. It tells me that there are 187 records that have met all of my criteria. There's a description, it's available online, it's at the National Archives in College Park, it's a map or a chart about the Army in France or the Canal Zone. Shows me all of those records. Record Group 120 tells me what it is, gives me the dates. I could limit this even further by date if I wanted to. 19 by decade. I could limit it even further to the type of file format, which I haven't done the first time. At the top, I had already told it I wanted materials that was available online, but it also gives me websites, pages, documents, images. So I can look at everything that's online and then decide, oh, well, let's see what documents they have also. And that's where the rabbit hole starts. Once you start getting into these other collections, you can really spiral out. So I chose the things that were available online. I chose my records that I wanted to look at. So if you just click on one, German Army maps, British Army maps. I pulled up the map of St. Michael, the operation that was from September to October 1918. And there are a series of maps that are within here. There's the National Archives identifier number and the local number. This is what you find in the finding aid. That it's on the shelf, it's in this collection, it's in folder 2. This is the number to pull it up in the catalog, that first number. I know it's very confusing and I don't expect you to remember that. Here's the craziest thing of all. If I were to click on a record and go to print that page, it would be blank. Very helpful, right? For whatever reason, when you go to print, it doesn't work. Best thing to do is do a screenshot of it, because then you're still getting the identifier number, the ARC number, the folder number. Otherwise, you just get a blank page. And then here's my map. I clicked on, I'm going to go back one so you can see where I was, hopefully. So I clicked on this record, this bottom record. And then it brings me to the page and shows me the image. So what I absolutely love about their images is that right at the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to show you one at the very end, it's right there, download. And you can download it right to your computer. So you get some really good high quality images. So this shows how the US and British troops are moving during that, where they are. You know, you've got the 4th Corps, you know, you've got the Army. This is the trench right here across the top. You know, 5th Corps, 4th Corps, 10th Corps. All great information for me to fill in on my family tree. What about locally? What if I want to know about more about Chicago records? So in this case, I did a search on the Eastland. Again, set my parameters, told it that I wanted to see records that were only available online, that were available at the National Archives in Chicago. I could have broadened that search out and just said I want to see everything that's in all of the National Archives facilities, because there are some that overlap. There are some things in Kansas City. There's video footage and some other documents that are at the National Archives too in College Park. I limited my search. It tells me here are our records, that there are 13, because that's when the Eastland went down in the 19 teens, 13 records, but then there are some before, there's some after, because the Eastland was repurposed after the disaster and went back out to sea until the Second World War when it was finally scrapped, or I shouldn't say out to sea, out to the Great Lakes before it was scrapped. But you can see all the different things we have. These all come out of Record Group 21, federal court cases. They were suing the owners of the ship, and they were suing the captain of the ship, you know, for criminal negligence and criminal charges. Negligence following the July 24th, 1915 capsizing of the SS Eastland in Chicago. If you were to click on any of these, the photos, it would take you to the photo. But let's go down that rabbit hole. What if I want to know what happened in this court case? I could click on those links to find out more information. So I chose the records that were available online. I get a ship's manifest. I get photos of the disaster. I get a copy of the bill for, I don't remember what the bill was for. I think it had something to do with stocking the ship for the event. But you can see each one has its own number, has its own identifier, and then it has its own, not only the record group, but it has that record series within it. So you can see these all come from the same case, the same criminal history case. There's the picture of the ship after it's capsized. You can see the holes that are cut into the hull. This is afterwards when there's no longer any activity. But right here at the bottom with the arrow, I could download it and save it to my computer. But boy, I'm super curious. I want to keep going. So it tells me that it's part of this investigation. This is probably one of the exhibits that they used in the hearing for the lawsuit against William Hull. So I could click on either the series or I could click on the file unit on the left to dig deeper. And when I click on that on the left, it brings me to the rest of the records that are within that collection. There's 5 items in the catalog of things that are pertinent to this court case, but it always gives me additional subjects. Any topic you click on, whether it's Second World War Army nurses, whether it's Civil War Confederate uniforms, there's always going to be additional categories. You can click through. Clarence Darrow, believe it or not, was in Chicago. So, he's one of the people that sat in on the court case. Kennesaw Landis Mountain, one of my favorite people. You probably have no idea who that is unless you're a baseball fan. He's the guy who was commissioner of baseball during the Black Sox scandal. He's the guy that threw all 8 of them out of the league permanently. I digress. But you can click on any of these links for additional records. But if I wanted to know more, I can search within this file and see all 5 of those records that have been digitized and made available. There are other records, but I was specifically looking at things that were online. And it shows me all those documents. So the record of the passengers that were on board, the certificate of inspection, giving them clearance to go out on the lake, the list of the passengers who are on board, plus the photographs that we had already seen. So you can really drill into collections this way too. So even if you're not quite sure, like I know that I want to look at Camp Grant records for Camp Grant in Rockford during the First World War, I can just search on Camp Grant and then drill in by using the facets on the left-hand side. Okay, well, I'm not looking for Camp Grant in 1950. I'm looking for Camp Grant in 1920. Limited by decade. I just want to see things online. I can limit it by if it's online or not. I want to see other similar things. I can do that by using the filters on the side. So once you've done that, then I know what's available at Chicago. I can make my list in my inventory, and then once they reopen, I can say, I want to see this collection based on this criminal court. Here's the archive number. But here's the location information and the court case number. I can give all of that to the archives clerk at the desk and have them pull the file for me. That's the information you want to pull out of it and get back to them. You do find some of that within here. Down at the bottom, I didn't go far enough down, but you would get that ARC number and the same things that we saw on that other page or at the top of the page where it gives us the date and it gives us the archive identifier number at the top. All of that is repeated at the bottom. And at the bottom, depending on the size of the collection, this is a pretty small collection. There's only a handful of items. But for something really big like Camp Dodge records or Fort Dix records, it's going to kind of give you at the bottom. This is a 120 box collection. And you can click through it to kind of figure out what it is that you need. So if I were to click on that record, photos are easy. It's a single static page. I can download that image. But when there are multi-page documents, it'll show you it in the tray at the bottom. So for example, there's an inventory by state of Second World War soldiers and sailors that were killed in action. You can pull up the inventory for Illinois, and it's like 116 pages long, alphabetical by county, and you would see all of that here across the bottom. So you could click through it and find the page you want. But if you want the whole thing, there's a button that allows you to download the entire PDF. So even if it's multiple pages, even if it's 100 pages, you still have the ability to download that as a whole or just the part you need. So now everybody's closed. How can I find out information? Or if I'm searching and I have questions, what do I do? Who do I contact? How can I get the answer to my question? The National Archives is extremely active on social media. So there are a number of ways. If you're an Instagram person, they're on it. If you're a Twitter person, they're on it. They have collections up in Flickr. So if you just want to browse through photo collections that they've made available, you can easily go in and view their photo stream in Flickr. Facebook has a really cool feature. So you know how we have instant messenger when we're in Facebook and we can send messages to our friends and family. They have a chatbot that pops up. So when you go to the National Archives page, this little box pops up and it says, how can we help you? And that is manned by somebody from 8 a.m., I think roughly to 5 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. So if I put in there, I was just on the catalog and I noticed that you have this record group. How do I find the finding aid for it? Somebody will look up the answer and answer you. Or if you say, I just found a photo collection on the First World War, where can I find more photos? They'll explain the process of how to find more photos. They are professionals that work for the National Archives. It's not some third party that's offsite somewhere else. So they're answering your questions in real time as they come up. Like I said, Prologue is amazing. Read their magazine if you're not already reading it. Each facility has its own blog, has its own Facebook page, has its own Instagram account, where you can dig deeper and learn more. Here's that Flickr page that I was talking about, where you can view different photograph collections that they already have available online. So if you're just doing research on baseball, believe it or not, they have a baseball collection that's up here and digitized, and I can just browse through it. Or things like Vietnam War or something, I'd be able to go in and take a look at what they've got. So you can kind of just browse, or you can contact them to dig deeper. These are all of their divisions. So like I said, you've got Chicago, Denver, Boston, Atlanta, in the formats that they're on. So we can see that Chicago is just on Facebook, but if you're the Archivist of the United States, you're David Ferraro, he's everywhere. He's on Tumblr, he's on Twitter, he's on Facebook. The National Archives at New York has an Instagram page. The U.S. National Archives, they're on Pinterest, they're on Twitter, they're, on a whole variety of different places. So there are lots of ways that you can find them and communicate with them. Another fantastic resource, so here's the chatbot. It automatically pops up. So if I have a question, I can write in my question and somebody's going to get back to me pretty quickly. But they also have History Hub, and they also have Citizen Archivists, where we can get back and we can get answers at the same time. So NARA, Library of Congress, all do a fantastic job at crowdsourcing. So basically what they do is they put records out there and they ask for our help, whether it's transcribing or whether it's going into the Citizen Archives, Archivist section that they have when the archives reopens and scanning. So if I go into the History Hub as a Citizen Archivist, I scan my great-grandpa's Civil War file, they'll take it and upload it to the website for the next person. So the work that we're doing is helping them get things up online faster. But the History Hub is absolutely fantastic. So these are people who work for the National Archives who can answer some pretty specific questions. So not only are they archivists with the National Archives, but there are other people who have expertise. Any one of us can sign up to answer questions for History Hub. So if I have an expertise working with First World War Camp Dodge records, I could answer somebody's question because I have experience in that collection. They'll answer it too. but you'll get multiple answers from people who have an expertise on that particular topic. So you can ask and you'll get an answer, or somebody else could ask and you could provide an answer to them. It's really a fantastic site. So somebody had asked once when I was looking through questions, they were looking about records for the 2nd Division, the 4th Corps, in the Marines during the Second World War, and where could they go to look for records? What would the record group be? And somebody spelled out in a very lengthy answer, here's how the military units broke down. These would be available through these record collections at these archives. So you're getting very specific answers. You're not just getting a, we'll check the catalog. No, they are walking you through it step by step. And like I said, that innovation hub, in person, you're scanning records, you're making them available to the people who come after you. Once the National Archives is back open again, we'll be able to get back into the center and sort of do our own work. They give you a copy of it, and then a copy that goes up online. They're always looking for people to transcribe and index collections. So if you go out to that link, right next to History Hub is a link that says Citizen Archivist, where you can get involved and you can help transcribe collections. So we've got a little bit of time before the Family Search starts asking us to transcribe the 1950 census. If any of you saw that announcement today, asking for people to volunteer to get the process started, we can go in and hone our skills by signing up for any of these other collections. There's always 5 or 6 different collections that are ongoing, so you can pick and choose what interests you. You just look at the page and write your transcript. It's really a great way to give back to the National Archives system, and it gets records in the catalog twice as fast, because as soon as it's transcribed and tagged, it goes up on the site. There's no delay. Here's a couple of examples. I did some screenshots. So, how to ID individuals in a World War I photo, and then some various people, and it kind of tells you, what their expertise is. We'll give responses to those answers, and then you can follow up. You can ask more questions. If they felt your answer was correct, you earn points, so to speak, showing your street cred. But then off to the side, there's always related or similar topics, so you can follow along and learn a little bit more. On their website, like I said, there's forms and all kinds of links to make access to records easier for you. Those pre-World War I records, those ones pre-1914 that are available at the archives, that's Form 180. You're going to download that form and mail it in. If you want to know more about things in the photographs collections, all kinds of links available for you to peruse later at your own time. All right. Question.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. I do have a couple questions that came in through the chat. So let me get to those. And let me start at the beginning.
Wow, that's good on time, yeah.
You did a great job.
I'm about to pass out because sucking into my mask.
I'm sure. Sorry. Okay, here's the first one. Let me just go back up a tiny. Hold on. Now you might have it.
Oh, I have it?
You might have, because,
Oh, I'll go back to sharing my screen now.
oh, wait a minute. Maybe I do have it.
Is that better?
I'm sorry. No.
I broke it. It's all my
Okay.
fault.
It's okay.
That's
It's
okay.
okay. We're gonna get the hang of this.
Yeah.
Yes.
You keep talking about you're gonna get a number.
Mhm.
Do you need that number to get documents online?
If you have it, it helps. But I think they recognize right now that it's impossible for somebody to come in person and do that. So when you fill out that form, it asks for your first name, last name, address, all that information. Yeah, like you put in any credit card transaction, it's going to ask for that information from you.
But
To verify you're a human being, because otherwise the credit card's not going to go through if the names don't match. So it kind of.
but if I don't have the number, it's not going to stop me
It should,
from.
not for
okay.
right now, not because we can't get into a building to get a new number, so it's not
Okay.
gonna stop you from that.
Okay.
It helps to have it, but it's not gonna keep you from access.
And you can't get it online.
At least you couldn't, granted, I haven't checked in the last few months, but at the time you could not.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a question from Joni. She said, and this is going back to closer to the beginning of the program. Did you say the request slip is a multi-layer so that you can keep a copy of the numbers they write down?
No. Well, what happens is it goes in the book and then they hand you a copy. If you choose to keep it, then you choose to keep it, but
Yeah,
one goes into their file, one goes to the person who's retrieving the document, and then you have one. And then when they take the books back, they match their two up.
yeah,
So that, oh, I've got the right books that are going back to the shelf. So that's why it's in triplicate. is
Yeah.
Because they need to match up their blue, their pink copy and their white copy when they go to refile the item.
yeah, yeah. And here's another one from Joni. Why were the alien registration files called C files?
There's citizenship files, you've got that process, when you're getting your alien registration card. For starters, you're filling out
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah.
Not everybody ever decided to become a citizen.
That's right.
So there are two record groups. There's that naturalization process that's in record group 21, but then there's that process of just documenting alien citizens within the United States that are in there, and those records can be linked. If you followed that process and became a US citizen, you're going to start with the alien file, you're going to start with your declaration of intent, your naturalization, and then your citizenship file. So they
Right.
should link together if you finish the entire process.
Yeah.
Not everybody did.
No, no. I have a question. When you said that some of the record groups are closed and we can't access them, can you do an FOIA?
It depends on the type of records, because there's the records that are at the National Archives are records that are supposed to be permanently managed and kept. But then a huge portion of those buildings are records management, records retention
Mhm.
records. So those are documents that the federal government is required to keep for 7, 10, 13,
Sure.
18 years. Those records are typically not accessible to the public.
Ever?
No, not ever, just until they decide, are they going to keep them and add them to the archives, or are they going to be destroyed at the end of their waiting period? Because that's what that records retention is, it's kind of a waiting period. So we don't have access to those records that are in the records management portion of the building unless there's a specific reason why we need to have access to, I don't know, Department of Health and Human Services records for South Side of Chicago for 2013. Like there's got to be a reason why you need access to those records. So they might make you fill out a FOIA. I've never done that. I've never accessed the records that are in that holding pattern, waiting for the records management retention schedule to be up. I've only ever worked with the records that have been approved and moved to the archive.
I see.
Does that make sense? There's
Yes.
two collections that they hold.
I do see. Because maybe I'm
There are some
unclear.
things that are sensitive.
Right. I think when President Kennedy was assassinated, it was either last year or the year before that they released some documents.
Some, and then there are some that still won't be released
Right.
until 2037.
Yeah,
So there are some information that's sensitive that is still considered classified, that's not released and not accessible
yeah,
to the public,
right.
so that's, gonna be
So even if you did an,
nuclear type experiment type stuff, like we probably cannot get full access to the stuff that
Oh,
is from Argonne
sure.
or National Laboratory.
right. So even if you did an FOIA, it'd be simply rejected.
Some things would. be.
Okay,
If it's a national security issue or if it's something
Sure.
that's classified, top clearance classified, then yeah.
uh-huh,
But it's fun to look at the records that have been released because they'll stamp them as declassified.
Yeah.
And like when you're at National Archives 2 in College Park and you're looking at Second World War records, like I was looking through missing in action reports for planes that had gone down and POW reports. And they give you a little slip of paper that you're supposed to put under all of your photographs that says these are declassified and available to the public.
yeah. Years ago, I was privileged to be able to go on a field trip to the National Archives with a library group. I think it was from Governor State that I went with this group. And we were actually able to go behind the scenes. And they showed us documents from World War II. Well, wait, I'm not sure. It was probably World War I, when sugar was rationed. And they actually had the cards with the people's name, the person's name on it, and how much sugar they were allotted. And I thought, oh my God, what? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you.
I was gonna say.
There's
Okay,
some
I don't have any of those, but I saw them there and I thought, oh my God, that is fascinating.
There's some really cool collections, like the
Yes.
FBI and RICO case files are in there. So if you want to, research more about, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Al Capone, any of, gang-related type activities in Chicago, they've got those files there.
Yeah,
They've got the mug books, the FBI mug books with all of the, the mug shots. Yeah, which is really cool.
Yeah.
They've got an index card file where you can go and look through the criminal files to see if your family shows up in them. There's the blue cards. And you can go through to see. So I looked for mine because we've had mobsters in my Italian family. So there are a couple of guys that, kind of show up adjacent to some of these criminal activities. They've got pre-Chicago fire records because bankruptcies and foreclosures were federal at the time. So after the Civil War in the 1870s, there were lots of soldiers who just went bankrupt because, the dollar had dropped, there wasn't a lot of value, and they filed for bankruptcy. Those records survived the fire because they were at a different facility, considered federal records, so they survived. Some land records, some land patents survived, some other court type documents survived. So they've got plenty of stuff that's pre-Chicago fire. Everybody thinks, oh, all those records are destroyed, but they've got some pretty cool 1840s, 50s, and 60s books records for Chicago.
yeah. I have another question. Do the naturalization records contain our arrival slips seen with naturalization documents, Soundex cards, and index cards?
The Soundex cards are on microfilm. I've never looked at the original cards, but they are available on they were done in 1910. They are available on microfilm, and I have looked at them.
Mhm.
I have not looked at strips, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
But that definitely just gave me an idea of what I want to do next time I go.
Yeah,
But I haven't used them. I have looked at the stub books,
yeah.
but I have not looked for the arrival slips.
I personally have ordered documents online from the archives. Even though I've been there, one night I was just too lazy to, think, oh, when am I going to go? I can just sit at my home and order it online, pay. They'll send me the copy, the scan, easy peasy. And it was a breeze. It was not difficult at all, so I would recommend it if you don't, especially now you can't get there. But if you can get there, have any of you ladies been to the National Archives?
35 years ago.
So,
Does it?
it looks, yeah, it's different.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say when you mentioned the computer, I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
The textual documents looks a little.
Yeah.
But the microfilm are still.
yeah. If you ever get a chance to go, and they are so helpful. They are very, very helpful. I can honestly say, from personal experience. So, anybody else here have a question? No? And let me just check one more time. I don't think we have any more. I have had a number of people, Tina, who I completely agree with. Love the program. Thank you. Fantastic job, Tina. Of course. Of course. So if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to turn this chat off and thank everybody for participating in tonight's program. Next month, we're going to have Adrian Brigham it will be only a Zoom program. Smokey the War Bandit, Smokey the Dog, the War Bandit. It will be Zoom only. So he won't be here in person. Smokey the War Dog. Yeah, yeah. So it will be Zoom only. So Tina, thank you so very much. Gosh, you are just so knowledgeable. I just can't imagine all the people that come to the Plainfield Library and pick your brain.
Well, it's been pretty quiet the last 18 months, but feel free to come in and pick. my
Really?
brain anytime.
Really? I mean, I find, especially the last 4 months, people have been coming in and asking me a lot of questions. And obviously I'm nowhere near as knowledgeable as you, but I'm so grateful. These people were part of a genealogy lock-in that we had on Friday night. And
Aren't you all this time? Aren't you like ready for a shower? And then
I was so excited because we had the whole library to ourselves. It was quiet and everybody really appreciated just having that time, no distractions. And we're hoping to do it again in 2022. So I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, Oak Lawn is doing it. We're doing it at Oak Lawn on December 3rd. So you have to register and I'll be there helping Kathy and the friends over there. So
So what do you do in the lockdown?
at the library, yeah, you can sit at a computer and play on the databases. Like here, they could do the vertical file. Any of the books that we have, the newspapers, the microfilm, the databases, and then we kind of brainstormed and people just worked on their genealogy. So it was wonderful.
There's something that you want to work on.
Yeah.
No, if you're sitting around.
There were 6 of us, yeah.
Okay, so you don't know when the next one is?
I haven't scheduled the next one, but it will be in 2022. And it will most likely be on a Friday night again from 6 to 9. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to stop the recording now. And thank everyone who joined us via Zoom. I really appreciate it and hope to see you next month. Thank you.